overview of who we are as NREC, and then I will kick it over to Kristen to give you the meat of the presentation and what you all joined us this morning for. So just a little reminder about who NREC is. We were actually created through state statute back in 2012. So here in 2016, we're in our 4th year of funding. And primarily, the council works to pursue nutrient research and educational programs, and we focus on 3 main areas, which is optimizing nutrient use efficiency, ensuring soil fertility, and then addressing any potential environmental concerns that are related to the use of fertilizer. The way that we're funded is by a 75-cent per ton assessment on fertilizer that's sold in Illinois. So as producers, you likely see that on your fertilizer invoice, and then also retailers are used to seeing that as they are the ones that submit that through the Department of Ag. Our organization is a great collaboration between ag associations, farmers, environmental groups, and then also state agencies. Really allocating funds, and the reason that we're here today is because we're able to allocate funds into research and then have outreach sharing the outcomes of that research that we've done. And so that's what Kristen's going to walk through, is some of the outcomes from research that was funded through NREC. And again, really tying back into those things on the last slide, we solicit research proposals that are focusing on those main 3 areas, which are improving nutrient efficiency, enhancing crop production, and then protecting water quality. And I know I'm here and we can't hear, so I'll try to get closer and speak up. Hopefully that helps it. All of the research funds that are, or the proposals that are sent through, are evaluated by the council, a research committee, and independent peer review teams. And then those projects are ranked on merit and availability of funds. We primarily put our projects into 3 different buckets. And so the first is really focused on the 4 R's. So looking at applying fertilizer in the right source, the right rate, the right timing, and in the right place. And this really goes back to just the agronomic management tools that are available on the farm. And so we do a lot of research into nitrogen timing, placement, and then also the form of nutrients that are being used. Then sort of the next area is looking at being able to recover nutrients in field. So these are things such as cover crops. And then finally, looking at where we weren't able to manage through 4 R's and where we weren't able to recover in field, looking at ways that we can reduce the impacts to the environment should we have nutrients that were able to escape that. So those include things like bioreactors, buffers, wetlands, etc. This year for 2016, we have awarded $2.8 million in research projects, and that's over 26 different projects. 17 of those are ongoing and 9 are new. We work with a variety of partners that include the University of Illinois, Southern Illinois University, Illinois State University, the Wetlands Institute, and then this year we worked with 2 county soil and water conservation districts. Over the course of the last 4 years, NREC has invested on behalf of Illinois farmers and retail organizations $9.3 million. Just briefly, and I know a lot of you are very familiar with the nutrient loss reduction strategy, but just want to talk a little bit about how what we're doing ties in with that. And through that strategy, we have a target of reducing loss of nitrogen 15% by 2025, and then ultimately a 45% reduction, and then also reducing the loss of phosphorus by 25% by 2025, and same thing, 45% ultimate. And so really looking at the loss of P is where Kristen's research has focused, and looking specifically at some ways to manage that. And so we'll go into some more details around that. I think something that's important, and we get a lot of feedback from farm groups asking really how much are we contributing to the issues that with nutrients that are being lost in our state. And again, to tie in with what Kristen's going to talk about, 11% of the phosphorus that makes it to the Gulf comes from Illinois. And then if you look down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that about half of that comes from agriculture. So we really are a big player in it. It's an important part of managing our nutrients and making sure that we are working to contribute, do our part to meet that strategy. Really, the best management practices that are outlined in the strategy tie in very well with the way that we at NREC are making funding decisions. So again, looking at in-field, edge-of-field, and then also looking at some land use changes around that. And then also looking at ways that we can combine those best management practices to see some larger scale reductions. As most that have worked with this know, this is a major issue that's facing our entire industry, and it's a great opportunity for us to work together. The way that NREC works together across producers, retail organizations, and also the environmental groups really is a great example of how this can be a success in our state. And again, the research that's being funded through NREC is really looking to forward that, and then also to provide the evidence that we need so that we can demonstrate and track the activity that we're doing. So at this point, I'm going to get ready to hand it over to Kristen. Kristen has led the work on a project that was funded through NREC that actually wrapped up in 2014, and it was looking at phosphorus runoff in a variety of different applications. And we really appreciate the partnership that we've had with the University of Illinois and the work that Kristen and her team have done. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to her and let her lead the discussion. And again, if you have questions, feel free to type those in there on the right-hand side down in the lower corner. And I'll turn it over to Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning. I really would like to thank Illinois Farm Bureau for inviting me here today, and NREC, and to thank NREC for supporting our projects. This project was fully funded with NREC support. So the project title that we're looking at here is Phosphorus Runoff from Surface and Subsurface Fertilizer Applications in No-Till and Strip-Till Fields with Minimal Slope Gradient in Central Illinois. So really long title, but what we want to look at is the different management practices and what kind of runoff are we getting from these 0 to 2% slopes, fields that cover a lot of Illinois. This project was written by Dr. Fernandez at the U of I, and worked closely with Dan Schaefer, myself, and Chris Rudisol, who is another research specialist on the team. Dan worked very closely with our on-farm cooperators. We would really like to say thank you to them, because without them this would not have been possible. Eric Rund and David Schaefer and Denny Restack and Jerry Christian started working with Dan years ahead of this to establish a replicated trial with treatments on it in strip-till, no-till systems. So again, why are we worried about phosphorus runoff? Well, we know that phosphorus runoff is a big contributor to the hypoxia dead zones in the bodies of water, most notably the Gulf of Mexico. Phosphorus is the nutrient that is most limiting to algae growth in these waters. Nitrogen is also a big factor, but phosphorus is the one that is most limiting. Agricultural runoff, as Julie mentioned, is a major contributor of the phosphorus moving into these waters, and the nutrient loss reduction strategy has noted that as much as 48% of the phosphorus leaving Illinois is coming from agricultural lands. So again, the Gulf of Hypoxia Task Force years ago had set a goal to reduce the hypoxia zone by 45% by the year 2015. This turned out to be a more complex situation and goal to meet, and now they've extended that goal by 30 years to the year 2045. So in conjunction with that, the nutrient loss reduction strategy has set the goal to reduce Illinois' phosphorus loss by 25% over the next 10 years, and ultimately leading up to that 45% reduction. So again, we know we have a large area of the production in Illinois is on 0 to 2% sloping fields. However, in recent years with the heavy rains, we've seen a lot of ponding and a lot of runoff. That water is really being able to move, especially in the springs with heavy rains. But what we have is a lack of scientific research on the effect of P rates, conservation tillage practices, and placement methods on those runoff concentrations. So looking closer at the effect of phosphorus placement and tillage on the concentrations in the runoff, we developed this project and were able to utilize the research began by Dan Schaefer with Jerry Christian, Danny Restack, David Schaefer, and Eric Runn, where they had replicated on three different farms phosphorus and potassium applications at 3 different tillage and placement combinations. So those fields had no-till broadcast, strip-till broadcast, and strip-till deep placement where the fertilizer was placed at 6 inches below the surface. Of the rates that they had in that project, we chose 3. So we had the low, medium, and the high. We have the check at 0 pounds per acre, our medium at 92 pounds per acre, and our high was 161 pounds per acre of P2O5. So to establish runoff collection on those fields, we went into the strips where they had treatments. Those strips were 20 feet wide by 500 feet long, but we just wanted to isolate a small area. So our microplots are 5 feet by 6.5 feet. To isolate the area, we have these boards here that had basically angle iron metal that was inserted into the ground. So we were controlling below ground movement of water and the above ground movement so that we just know that the phosphorus that we were analyzing was coming right off of that known area. Each year we wanted to create 2 runoff events. So after harvest in 2013, Dan and the guys went out and established new treatments. So they had fall application of the fertilizer at all the placement methods. And then right after that, we went out and started installing our microplots and getting ready for runoff. So there was an average of 2 weeks after the application where we collected runoff. And then we came back again in the spring on the same treatment passes in a new untouched location and conducted the runoff trial again right before planting. So those treatments had been knifed in the fall and settled in over the winter, and then we checked the runoff again. So to create runoff, what we did was generate a rainfall intensity equal to a 10-year storm. In Champaign County, that was a rainfall of 2 inches per hour. Each event generated runoff for 30 minutes. And during that 30 minutes, we measured the entire volume of runoff that was generated. And then we collected water samples and analyzed for 3 forms of phosphorus. The first is the dissolved reactive P, which is basically the soluble phosphorus that's in the water solution. The second is total phosphorus. The total phosphorus is the solution including the sediment, so you're also getting the phosphorus that's generated from the soil particles. And the third was the algal available phosphorus, or most people call that bioavailable phosphorus. So the other thing we did at the time of the runoff event was to collect soil samples from the top inch. We wanted to look at the amount of phosphorus that was available in that surface layer of soil right at the same time that we were collecting rainfall. So here's a good image of our microplot borders installed over the treatments. And then this is our one of 4 rainfall towers situated over the plot. The rainfall towers were equipped with plumbing and pressure regulators to help us control the water flow. But it also had these curtains that you could see attached to the sides that we could raise and lower, which was really nice. It helped us keep the wind from pushing our rain droplets off target. And being able to bring them back down was a great asset, so that when we went to move them, we didn't fly giant kites across the field. We found out the hard way that you can drag 4 grown people across the field on a windy day. So here's another good image of how we've situated the microplots and the rainfall towers right over the treatment passes. So part of the system was this pumping system that we used that could supply water to 1 to 4 towers at a time. We were bringing in water from a local municipality, so we were trucking the water into the road and pumping it out to the field to these nurse tanks, so the system was full all the time. Here's a good image of the nozzle. Each tower had one nozzle in the center location, and that nozzle at the correct pressure really generated an actual rain droplet size, so we were able to replicate rainfall pretty well. And it covered the area of the plot and just outside the plot really well. This next slide is an image of how evenly distributed that rainfall was. It did a really good job of capturing rainfall there. So once we began rainfall, we let those plots get rain and continuously and just monitored each plot until the runoff actually began. When runoff initiated down the collection triangle, we timed that runoff for 30 minutes and captured the entire volume and pulled our samples. After the 30 minutes, we shut the rain off, so no more rain was falling, but we had some runoff that continued, so we monitored that. We went ahead and captured that volume and did an analysis of the runoff that continued past rainfall. So with all that work, we got a lot of analysis, so we can look at different concentrations by treatment. This is a graph of P loss by treatment, and the two analyses that are on this graph are dissolved reactive phosphorus, which again is the soluble phosphorus, and then we have total phosphorus. So the water solution, but still including the water particles and the phosphorus that's coming from those particles. If you look at the graph at the bottom, we have each tillage placement method. So we have no-till broadcast on the left, strip-till broadcast in the center, and strip-till deep placement where the fertilizer was 6 inches below the surface, and the 3 rates. For each placement method, you see concentrations in the runoff increasing by P rate naturally. But what you see with the strip-till deep placement, especially with the dissolved reactive phosphorus, at the right hand of the graph is that those levels, even at 92 pounds per acre and 161 pounds per acre, are statistically the same as the check plots in strip-till broadcast and no-till. So basically, we got dissolved reactive phosphorus levels that are statistically the same as the check. For total phosphorus, we did see an increase with P rate there a little bit, but significantly lower than we got with the strip-till broadcast. We can look at the concentrations analysis by fertilizer placement method alone. So we combine all that data and we have no-till broadcast, strip-till broadcast, and strip-till deep placement. And what you can see is there's a significant reduction in the dissolved reactive phosphorus with the strip-till deep placement. With the total phosphorus, we still saw a reduction, but again, I don't believe that was statistically significant, but the benefit is still visible. So look at phosphorus load. We take that concentration and then multiply that by the volume of runoff that we collected. So the total runoff that came off of that plot, or off of the different treatments, what was the total load in pounds per acre of phosphorus that was moving? This graph is oriented by the 0 rates at the left and the high rates at the right. And what you see is that for each rate, the strip till broadcast is the one giving us the least amount of total runoff load for both dissolved reactive P and total P. For curiosity's sake, it's nice to look at runoff concentration between the two seasons. So we've combined our fall data that we collected approximately 2 weeks after the applications were made in the field. And then we have the two lines in blue and green at the bottom that are our spring collection of runoff. The spring runoff, you can see, is relatively, the data is flat. This was after rainfall had incorporated some of our treatments and the soil had settled well. But if you look back at the fall, we see the variability there and significantly high with strip till broadcast there at the 161, but a good reduction with strip till deep placement again.
And Kristen, we did have a question about what was the fertilizer form that was used?
It was triple super phosphorus, so just phosphorus alone. So again, at the runoff event, we were also collecting 1-inch soil samples to see what that surface availability was. And then right after harvest, we had actually collected deeper soil samples to look for the stratification of the soil through the profile. So we have the 0 to 1-inch cores graphed here, along with 0 to 4-inch, 4 to 8, and 8 to 12-inch deep soil samples. And what we see is an increase with P rate of the soil available phosphorus. But what you really notice at the right hand of the graph is the surface phosphorus in the strip till deep placement has drawn down, so you have an actual higher band at 4 to 8 inches. So the nice thing about this project was we had 6 years of treatment. So these plots had been in place. That surface phosphorus was able to draw down, and we got good results there where you could see the impact of strip till deep placement over time with the fertilizer draw down at the surface.
Yes. So we do have another question.
Okay.
If you go back. Is the P1 in parts per million or pounds per acre?
Parts per million, I believe. Good question. I'm trying to remember if we converted that. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, we'll get that answer. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay. So as producers, we all want to know how are these different management practices affecting our yields? So in this project, the first year we produced corn. The second year, all the fields produced soybeans. So 2014 was a really good year for growing soybeans, and we basically had nothing limiting here. The yields were consistent across all treatments. But what we saw in the corn from the year before was a significant increase in yield with the strip till bands. But the difference, there's no statistical difference between strip till broadcast there and strip till deep placement, but yet they both did well compared to no-till. If you take the yields and look at them just by P rate alone, you can see that 192 over here in the corn at the 0 rate, and a good increase up to 204 with both 92 and 161. But what I think is significant here is that you didn't get any benefit of the increased fertilizer from 92 pounds per acre to 161. And again, no differences across the soybeans that year. This is just a chart of yield across all the different treatments, and again, just noting that we got significantly better yields with the strip till in both forms, broadcast and deep placement. So what are the key points that we got from the data so far? The data shows that deep placement allows for drawdown of P at the soil surface and reduces that potential for phosphorus movement. Deep placement also gives us the opportunity to significantly reduce P loss via runoff, even on the large area of Illinois that we have that is relatively flat with the 0-2% slopes. And moderate applications of P, such as 92 pounds per acre, generated significantly lower loss than the 161 pounds per acre, but yet maintained a similar crop yield. As we move forward, we know that runoff from our fields is going to happen, but it's going to be important to keep looking at research on the management practices that can reduce the loss of phosphorus on these ag lands.
All right. Well, thanks, Kristen and Julie. This is Lauren Lurkins again. I will just go ahead and kick off some questions that I have, but I encourage everybody just to go back, either hit that chat button on your computer or over down in the corner of that question and answer column. So one of the things that I was thinking was, when you all set out to do this project, did what you find actually line up with what you expected to see, or did you have some surprises at the end of the day?
No, I think that's what we expected to see. We know that the strip till was going to, have a tillage effect and have looser soil. So we had more soil movement with the runoff. So we had, those total phosphorus levels had some more soil particles movements in there. But we also, expected that the deep placement fertilizer was going to be the one that reduced the phosphorus runoff the most.
Great. Okay. My other thought that I had, this is obviously focused in central Illinois on, you said 0-2% sloping fields. So, how would you see, knowing that this obviously occurred in that one location, how would you guess how it would impact other areas of the state? So other areas where you do have the 0-2%, but then other areas where you have a greater slope, kind of what are your thoughts on takeaways for those different areas?
What we've seen is those areas really have a different set of management practices and a lot of different questions that do need to be asked. So we did some research on more slope with different fertilizer applications years ago with Dr. Haft at Monmouth, and again, incorporation was key there.
Okay. That was going to be my follow-up question. So, any other research sort of that's already been done that's very, current, or things that are currently in the works that folks could be looking for if they're not from the central Illinois part of the state?
Well, one thing I think would be good to note is that we've seen similar research in Iowa, and they didn't do the exact same treatments, but we kind of wanted to look at their research where they were manually incorporating the fertilizer, so not leaving it on the surface. That gives similar results to our deep banding. And it's not necessarily true because you are having more soil movement. So the soil particles are key there. Not exactly the same results as deep placement.
Okay. And then we also do have a question on the computer. Do you know what the cost differences are between the strip till and the deep placement?
I do not have those numbers.
Okay.
No.
And I think that is a good question about the economics. That is something that, from NREC's perspective, that we've really started to try to incorporate into the new projects going forward. Because understanding at the end of the day, in order for farmers to incorporate those practices onto your farms, understanding the economics is going to be important. So that's a great question, and I do see that that's hopefully something we'll be looking at in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, are the, so one of the other questions that we have is, have you checked the stats on the relationship between surface soil test levels and runoff amounts measured, i.e., could surface soil test results be used to estimate potential P losses for a field?
Right, good question. And we didn't look at that specifically in a lot of depth with this project yet, but I have read a couple papers where there's conflicting views on that, and some people have found, yes, Bray 1P test was a really good indicator and a really good place to start at the surface. And others said that, well, it's more complicated than that, but it can be a good place to start.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the group?
I'd just like to say that I really appreciate everybody listening and being interested. It was really great to present the research that we've been working on and to work with NREC and the Illinois Farm Bureau.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And, while we wait to see if other folks have, I'll just let you know that this is actually, we were joking that Kristen is our guinea pig. This is the beginning of a 4-part series that Illinois Farm Bureau is sponsoring for NREC. We are, I'm just starting to learn how researchers operate, and it takes a couple years until you feel comfortable to be able to talk about what you found. So we do fortunately have a lot of NREC projects that are at the point where folks are comfortable talking about them and what they're finding without really jumping the gun. So we're really excited to partner with Julie and with the council to offer, we're hoping a 4-part series of these webinars. So this one in particular will be recorded and posted on Julie's website, which is www.illinoisnrec.org. So go there in the next 48 hours or so, share it with your friends and your colleagues so that we can get the word out. And this is just one of the examples of the research that farmer dollars are investing in our state, and that's a bright spot now when we don't have a whole lot of extra funds going anywhere. So that the next series, we're hoping to do another one of these webinars in June. The date will still need to be announced. But we thank you all for your time. If you have questions that you need to marinate for a little bit, please don't hesitate to contact any of us. Julie's always available to cover the cost. And I think we might have one more question here. We'll see if I can get it too. Okay.
I'll have to, there was a question about getting CEUs, and I'll have to confirm that with Lisa Martin at CCA's. So that's a great question, and I'll add that to the information when we post the link for that. But great question.
All right, well, we'll let everybody go and enjoy your day, but we really thank you for spending your morning with us to learn a little bit more about this research project. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.